Hello and welcome to the video. This is my unboxing and first look at this brand new plane from ZOHD. This is the ZOHD Delta Strike. Now, for those of you that have been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I looked at its older brother, I guess you'd call it, the Alpha Strike, a little bit of a while ago. And the Alpha Strike was a slightly more conventional wing that had a prop at the back and had lots of space for things like a flight controller. Now, this Delta Strike was teased 3-4 weeks ago, and this is a version of that Alpha Strike, Series 3, I think ZOHD are calling it, that has an EDF inside. Now, this is a little 50mm EDF, and it's interesting to read some of the copy that's on the ZOHD website, because they say, we've touched every possible corner when it comes to fixed-wing FPV, long-range speed, sub-250 gram and everything in between. Now it's time to explore something new, a new feel, a higher challenge, and then they go on to talk about this. And this definitely seems to be something that ZOHD are aware that they haven't had in their lineup, because the last one that I looked at, the Alpha Strike, was a very capable model. It was actually very quick and very nimble and agile, and not aimed at beginner pilots in any way, shape or form, but there was still tons of room inside, and there was lots of room for flight controllers and other pieces too. So if you wanted to add those bits with a camera mount in the nose, then it was a pretty conventional setup. But ZOHD have done some really interesting things with this Delta Strike. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the standard stuff. We'll unbox it, we'll have a look at how it all arrives and how it goes together, take a quick look through the manual, talk about some of the setup, and then I can kind of talk about my initial impressions of what I found here with my first couple of hours kind of playing with this and having a long hard look at this new Delta Strike. So let me show you how it comes in the box. The box is pretty much exactly the same size as the Alpha Strike box. They're relatively small and compact. Quite a nice surprise because although these planes look quite big, they're a nice size, which means they're easy to transport, and because the wings are designed to pop on and off and all the electrical connections are made at the bottom, there's just one carbon spar, they're a piece of cake to put together. As usual, on the top of the box we have all of the latest ZOHD models, and we also then have the bits for its sister company Sonic model, all the pieces from those as well. I've looked at every single one of these ZOHD models on the channel if you want to go and have a look. Again, this is a 50mm EDF FPV wing, and it has a built-in pan servo that you get. Now, looking at the wings, these feel very reminiscent of the wings that we've already looked at on the Alpha Strike. Electrical connections at the bottom, carbon spar hole connection via one single screw, the ball links on the servos. The servos look like they might be metal geared as well, which would be very nice. I always like the way that ZOHD put a bit of effort into making sure that things like the linkages are all set up out of the box. The way that ZOHD finish their products is always very, very nice. And you can see that there are a couple of differences. We'll look at it side by side with an Alpha Strike wing in a minute, and we'll have a look and see what differences there are. But this all feels very, very familiar indeed. Now, the interesting thing with this is that whereas the Alpha Strike had twin tails, which we'll look again in a minute, this has a single vertical stabilizer that goes up at the back above the channel, again held in place via a single thumb screw that goes through that piece. Now, it's the main body, of course, that we all want to have a look at, but keep in suspense a moment longer. The last other bit of plastic that you get in here, expanded foam, is this thing. This is the nose cone. It's actually held in place by a magnet, but it's also molded so that it has some little catches at the top and bottom. So this actually snaps in pretty securely. EPP foam on this, so pretty standard stuff. It tends to be what most of the stuff that these guys use is made from, and it's pretty bulletproof. So here's the main event. First thing I notice as I take the cover off is how long and thin the battery bay is. Lots and lots of airflow for it, which is good. And then the next big thing, of course, is this is where the supplied pan servo goes for the FPV, and the servo that's supplied to go in there from ZOHD is 120 degrees. We have the place to hold it for hand launching, which is going to be interesting. EDFs are usually a little bit trickier to hand launch. We have massive scoops at the side, and then at the back there, yeah, you're looking, there's that 50mm EDF, which is accessible through the port at the bottom. You can kind of open that up and drop the EDF out if you really want to. So it's very, very similar to the Alpha Strike, but is a little bit more svelte. It feels like what they've done is they've cut some of the nose out each side in order to get the scoops. Last couple of things in here then, we have all of the stickers that go with it and the single carbon spar that runs through the body into the wings. So with all the pieces out, let's actually put this thing together, see how complicated it is. I don't think it's going to be particularly tricky. So again, this is an EPP foam model. Wingspan is 600mm, which is pretty much the same as the original Alpha. The length is 610mm. It says minimum flying speed is about 30 kilometers an hour. The Alpha is not bad at flying more slowly, but definitely better at flying fast. This thing, it reckons maximum flying speed is about 120 kilometers per hour with recommended setup. Recommended takeoff weight is 750 grams, and the power combo is an EDF 50mm fan with a 2611 4000 kV motor. The ESC inside this is a 40 amp ESC with a 5 volt 3 amp BEC, and then the servos are pre-installed in the wings in this kit that I've got here, with one additional 180 degree piece for the pan and tilt servo for the top, and it's going together really nicely. You do have to make sure that the pieces are really pushed home in order for some of the holes to line up for the thumb screws that hold it all together, but I really like models like this that you don't have to glue, that you can take apart, and that it's easy for transport, because this thing would pretty much fit anywhere in any size car, in your boot, whatever, and you can kind of break it down so it doesn't get damaged. There's one short screw that goes into the fin at the back, and then the two longer thumb screws go into the wings. Now it's all together, let me grab the Alpha Strike that I built out when I did that review. Let's put them side by side and see what's changed. Because looking at this, this looks quite different from the Alpha Strike. I just thought it was going to be an Alpha Strike with an EDF. I think it's something a little bit different. So here they are side by side on my bench. The Delta Strike is on the left, the Alpha Strike is on the right. And as soon as you get them close to each other, you realize that although they share a lot of the same DNA in terms of the design, they are very, very different planes. How different? We'll have a look. I really like the Alpha Strike. We have a really big, fat, wide battery bay at the front, and then also we have a huge area at the back that means you have loads of room for your flight controller, your video transmitter, and all the other different pieces. The only thing I had to do was kind of pop in a GPS at the side. So it's very easy to have a conventional FPV setup. There's the camera mount at the front. So this is a very fun, fast model to fly. However, it looks like they shrunk the nose down in order to get those vents. So my initial impression does seem to be panning out here. So rather than have this wider body, they still have had the wider body, but they've inflated it at the back to get the EDF in and then kind of shortened the nose. Now that does mean that the shape of the battery bay is very, very different. And you can see that if I put these two pieces side by side. But one of the other things I'm noticing here is that there isn't the same provision for flight controller and GPS and all those other bits that we had in the Alpha. The Delta seems to be made more for the, single receiver and manual, I guess, flight stuff rather than anything else. So if we flip them over, we can see how closely matched they are. Very similar, but you can see they've evolved the design a little bit. The wings in particular look almost identical, but the more I look at them, the more I can see that they might look very, very similar, but actually they're not, and they're not interchangeable. The mounting points are in different positions on the body. The Delta Strike is much more further forward. The Alpha Strike, it's at the back. There's also some raised servo protection that's built into the underside of the wing on the Delta that isn't there on the Alpha Strike. So yeah, they definitely have redesigned everything for this rather than just put an EDF in the central body and kept the wings the same. But I guess they couldn't have the same mounts. In fact, there we go, definitely different. You can look at the ends. The ends of the wings are very, very different indeed. I guess they couldn't just have the mounting point in the same place with the EDF taking up so much room at the back. So in terms of my initial impressions, what do I think? Well, I like the quality, fit and finish of all the pieces. This is standard ZOHD stuff. They make really nice models. I know some people have complained in the past about things like there was a batch of drifts that had the tail installed the wrong way around, and you hear about that a lot. But in my experience here, and I bought and played and set up with a lot of the ZOHD stuff here, not only for myself, but for friends and flying buddies, they've all gone together really nicely. Like the fact that they're using things like ball links and servo stuff, it all looks nice out of the box. And it is very similar to the Alpha, but different in a few key ways. That EDF is going to be interesting to get out and fly with. An EDF is going to give us an awful lot of noise. It's going to be consuming the battery at a fair old pace. And an EDF also makes launches a little bit trickier. All those little blades means there's lots of stalling potentially in still air. It's only when the EDF starts moving that it starts to bite. Now, I've looked at a number of other EDFs on the channel, and they are incredible fun, and they make a fantastic noise. Some EDFs are easier to launch than others. It's going to be fascinating to see how that all works, because this definitely looks like it's been built to be a hand launcher. Sadly, not a lot of room in here for a flight controller and GPS. There potentially is a bit of room behind where the battery would sit, but unfortunately, if you are looking for a plane for a flight controller, this absolutely isn't designed for that. So there's other models from ZOHD and others that are going to be better choices. See my iNav and Ardu plane builds. While we're talking about things like batteries, let's have a quick go at trying to see where the balance point is. Now, normally with an EDF, you have all of the weight right at the back of the model, and it can be tricky to get the central gravity right. Now, the recommendation for this in the manual is a 4S battery, something like a 2200 or similar. So I'm going to put one of the heavier batteries in to try this. And interestingly, I can actually get it to balance with the battery pretty much at the back of the battery bay. So with this, you could use smaller, lighter batteries towards the front of the battery bay, or if you installed other things like the FPV pan and tilt setup in the back and so some other pieces, then you have a lot of room to push the battery forward to offset that. So in terms of central gravity, and getting the central gravity right on this, that's actually really easy. The manual itself is pretty straightforward and covers pretty much what I've already done in the video, but very nicely, and a big props to ZOHD for doing this, they have included the basics, i.e. it's 10mm throws up and down, and they're calling for the reflex, i.e. when you set the control surfaces up for neutral, have them up slightly. Now that is pretty typical. I needed a lot more for my Alpha Strike. I'll put a link down below to the review if you want to go and have a look at that. So I will probably go a little bit more aggressive for my reflex setup for the maiden flight, and probably just go just slightly forward of those CG marks. Sadly, there isn't any camera mount to go with the pan servo for the camera. I might design one, stick one on Thingiverse. I'm going to install probably one of my pan and tilt setups on this particular model so that we can try it out. The camera position is an interesting idea, having it there dorsally mounted in front of the vertical stabilizer, basically looking down the whole nose of the plane. How much of that nose is going to be in the view when we're flying is something I'm interested in trying out, because normally these kind of delta wing models need a little bit of high alpha in order to fly level, i.e. the nose needs to be up 5, 6, 7, 8 degrees sometimes, and I'm not sure whether that means all you're going to be looking at is the nose and trying to look around the nose to look forward. I'm guessing ZOHD have tested all that, so I'm interested to see how that is done, and when in a trimmed level flying position, how well that camera setup actually works. Sad there's no provision for a camera mount in other places, but it's relatively easy with an X-Acto to cut out a little bit of foam in the nose in a similar way that I did to the Alpha Strike. Again, this model is clearly not aimed at the new pilot or pilot with limited skills. This is a very noisy, fun, fast EDF that's designed to have just a receiver in it, a ton of expo on your radio transmitter, and have your big boy pants on when you go to the field to just fly it around and have a lot of fun. So join me in the next video where I will go through how I've set it up and the Maiden. I just need to wait for the weather to break here so that we can get this out and have a fly and see what it's like in the air. But another interesting model from ZOHD and a fun evolution of the Alpha Strike. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.